I used to go on holiday to a place called Brighouse Bay, a caravan park, southwest of Scotland, of Rees and Galloway, just a few miles outside of Kirkcudbright. It had a lovely sandy beach, a shallow bay, great for swimming in, an extra wee beach, we called that the wee bay. It had a jetty or a slipway for launching boats and canoes, lots of woods against the rocks that surrounded the bay. You could walk up round the cliffs. The campsite, it was, when I first went there, it was back in the 70s, just a wee road through some fields, a few spots for tents, a few static caravans, a little shop, a toilet block. Not much more than that. The kids had fun playing at the parks, or going out in the boats, or going to the beach and playing in the sand, and it was great. I think I first went there when I was 2 or 3, so that would be about 1977, and we went there for many years until I was 13 or 14, and then stopped. Visited back a couple of times just out of nostalgia over the next few years until I had my own kids, and then we spent a few years going back to Brighouse Bay and visiting that again. It was great, fantastic holidays. Obviously, it changed a lot over the years. Quadrupled in size. They built a golf course and a swimming pool and all the mod cons you'd expect from a kind of modern holiday park. But essentially, it was still Brighouse Bay. The kids played in the beach. We had fires and barbecues in the wee bay, and they would go fishing for crabs round about the slipway and off the rocks. But that is not what I want to tell you about today. Not the last time I was there, but not far from it. I was out walking round the site, as you do, actually walking the dog, and down near one of the gaps in the wall that ran along the edge of the woods and separated the site from the woods, the rocks and the bay itself. There's lots of little gaps and lots of paths that you can wander down, take your bike down, do whatever you want to explore. And as I was wandering down to go through one of these gaps to take the dog down to the beach and let her have a run in the sand, I noticed an old van, a caravan, not a big static van, just a small caravan. It's ancient. It still had an awning around it, which looked as old as the van itself. And I'm sure that was there when I was a wee boy. So from maybe the age of 5, 6, 7 through to the age of 40, 5, 6, 7, that same van still sat there. It looked well kept despite its age, but it was an old van nonetheless. And that made me think, it made me wonder about how many people had been visiting that campsite as long as I had, and perhaps more often than I had over the years. And I wondered about the story behind that van. I didn't think much more of it because I got into the woods with the dogs and we went for a walk down to the beach, through some rocks and sticks. She had a great time. I got wet. Came back to the van before heading out to the shop later on to grab a loaf of bread and some sausages for a quick snack. And when I was in the shop, the old farmer who owned the site, owned the land, must have been maybe even in his 90s at that point. And I asked him, what's the old van down by the gap, behind the plane I described it, because they've now got an old plane there as well. Still, the old van down by the gap, what's that all about? That looks absolutely ancient. Does somebody still use that? And he said, aye, they do. And this is the story he told me. Back when the campsite was not long open, possibly when I was there as a small boy, maybe before that, maybe on one of the off seasons when I wasn't there. I didn't know what time of year it was, but back then the site would have only been open spring through summer, closing in October for the winter shutdown. But way back then, there was two couples. They came regularly. They friends of the landowner, Old Tom, and they would show up in their wee tourer caravan, stick up their awning. The guys had a wee fishing boat, not a fishing boat like hauling nets around, really just a bit of a dinghy, a couple of oars. The bay at Brighouse is incredibly shallow. It's calm. It's, you can go out in it no problem at all. It's a very, very safe place to go, but teeming with mackerel. Even the odd kind of cod and ling would float in there. Taupe, basking sharks at the end of the bay, porpoises swimming around the cliffs. It was fantastic. So they would take their old dinghy, a couple of rods or crab lines, head out, drag the boat down off the wee bay, later down the slipway, he said, and just go out, drop their lines, catch a few mackerel, whatever it was, bring them home and have them for their tea. And they did this regularly. They weren't from far away, they were fairly local, so they would just go for the weekend. As soon as the shift finished on a Friday, they would head over there, spend a couple of days, and then head back to the grind afterwards. So the guys would be out dropping the lines, having a fish, and the wives did whatever the wives would do, a blether and a wander, and just enjoyed relaxing for a wee while. There was no kids or anything around, just the four of them, the two couples. And one late evening, the guys were out in the boat. They came back in. They'd had a reasonable day fishing, probably. I don't know. I went fishing there a few times myself and never came back completely empty-handed. Sometimes know an awful lot, but never completely empty-handed. And they were hauling the boat back up the slipway. Normally they would leave it down there, but from what Tom said, they were planning on heading back with the boat because they wanted to do a bit of work on it before bringing it back down in the next couple of weeks and putting it back in the water. Just a wee dinghy, so it pops up in a trailer. Reverse the trailer down the slipway, haul the boat onto it, pull it out of the water and drive back up away through the woods and back to their van onto the site. So I don't know their names. He never said. Let's call them Greg and Joe. So Joe was in the car and Greg got the boat loaded up, tied it down, and Joe drove up the slipway, clearing it from the water, getting up to the top, and then stopped and waited for his pal Greg to catch up with him, and then they could both drive a couple of 100 yards is all it was through the woods, a wee loop round the road and back down to where their caravan and awning were, and their lovely wives waiting for them, possibly ready to clean and cook some mackerel. So Joe had stopped the car. It was getting dark. The lights, so the tail lights were on. Greg wandered up. Be careful of your footing on that slipway, because if the tide was low, it would be very, very slippery. You don't want to take a fall there. So he went up, went to climb into the car, and noticed that Joe wasn't there. He wasn't sitting behind the wheel. The key was in, engine was running, but Joe wasn't there. Door was closed. Greg didn't know, but he assumed he's just nicked out to take a quick pee. He'll be relieving himself behind one of the trees or the rocks that just surrounds the whole of the bay. So he waited a minute, no sign of him. He waited another minute, no sign of him. Getting a wee bit frustrated, he got out of the car, started shouting out for him. Joe, you there, man? Where are you, man? Where are you? Come on, going up the road. None. No reply. Nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. So he listened out. It would be getting dark, and when it gets dark, where there's no street lights, it gets really dark, and you're in the woods as well, so it's even darker. So almost pitch black. If the moon was out, you might get a wee bit of a shine down in the rocks, but once you get into the trees, you've got no chance of seeing anything at all. So he waited a bit longer. Still absolutely nothing at all. So he went back to the car, pinged on the full beams to see if he could see into the trees. Still couldn't see anything. With the full beams on, he had a wee look, so it's a bit kind of wet and muddy always down there, just because it's right next to the shore. Only if you've had baking sun for a few days would it have dried out. And he could see boot prints heading along one of the paths. So the way we've got the slipway heading into the sea, and then 50, maybe not even that, yards further back towards the beach in the bay, another wee path that takes you along, and there's a wee shingly beach that was called the Wee Bay, probably is still called the Wee Bay, and that was kind of the original boat launch jetty point for that. There's an old winch there, an old rusted out winch that used to haul the boats back up over the gravel. So it's just a wee gravelly beach. It's not big. You know, families and teenagers will go down there and have a bonfire and cook some sausages and drink some beer and whatever they do down there. But at this point, there was no signs of life along there, but the boot prints headed in that direction. They didn't see any sign of anyone else having been out and about on their boats that evening, that day. Hadn't seen anybody else in the bay at all. Must have been late in the season. So Greg just took a wee wander along to see if he could find them. So it's a wide path, that one, but not wide enough to drive. So he had to walk in the dark, as you would. He didn't have a torch or anything on him. Silly boy. So I've been told. So he took a wander along, shouting out for Joe as he went. Still no sign of anything, nothing at all, none whatsoever, until he got to the Wee Bay, which, as I say, 50 yards, doesn't take long to get along there. As he kind of came round the last few trees, and the Wee Bay opened itself up, and you could see the wee gravel beach. There was like a kind of kettle barbecue grill type thing, just sat almost dead centre in the beach, glowing away. So obviously there was a bit of flame or something on there, but it was burning away, and you could see there was something on it cooking. So, well, obviously it wasn't Joe who'd done that, because it would have taken a wee while to get something going and burning and glowing that red. But Greg wandered over anyway, thinking maybe Joe had seen it and gone along and bumped into somebody new and they were having a blether or whatever it might have been. So he walked over, and got to the grill, had a look around again. You know, the light in his eyes from the grill made it even harder to see in the dark. But he shouted out for Joe. "You there? Where are you? Come on, Joe, you're taking the piss. We need to get up the roads." Nothing at all. And then he looked down at the grill to see what was cooking. It was a hand, just sat curling up like a dead spider on the grill. And this obviously freaked Greg out a wee bit, as it would, you know, a human hand on a grill. And again, this is way back in the day, so it wasn't likely to be some sort of prosthetic prank. That would have been an expensive prank to play at that time. So he didn't know what to make of it. Freaked out. You're convincing yourself this can't be true. This can't be right. This cannot be like a human hand sat on a grill in the middle of a wee gravel beach just outside Kirkcudbright. You know, that's not happening. So he had a quick look around, and there was a couple of bigger sticks still lying that hadn't been fed into the barbecue. So he grabbed one of them and he flicked the hand off onto the gravel beside the grill. And it kind of, you know, turned over, so it looked like something out of a horror movie. Well, obviously something out of a horror movie, a cooked hand. And smoke, steam coming off, and it hadn't been on there long. It wasn't scorched and burnt. It was still very recognisably as a hand. But what was even more recognisable was the wedding ring on the knuckle. And, you know, one of those kind of gold bands with the black onyx and a couple of wee lines on it were popular for a while. And Greg knew that was Joe's wedding ring. He'd been his best man. He'd known him all his life, since they were wee boys. They'd always just mucked about together, and he knew that ring. He knew that hand. It was his mate Joe's. Freaked out, to say the least. He just turned, bolted back to the car, got in, started banging the horn, then shouting out the window, "Joe, Joe, where are you, man? Joe, Joe, Joe." Banging the horn some more. Nothing at all. And there was nothing more he could do there. Obviously, long before mobile phones, and to be honest, don't get reception there anyway, but long before any of that, so he jumped into the car, he unlatched the bolt first, because that would, slow you down dramatically. So he jumped into the car, battered up over the rocky track, onto the wee rougher track round the campsite, got back to the caravan and the awning, and the wives are there. She says, look, can he find Joe? He was in the car, now he's not. I don't know where he's got to. Can he find him? So I need to go and get some help. So on the campsite, there was one phone, and it was up at the shop, which isn't far away to walk. It's even quicker when you jump in the car. So he got in the car and he bombed up there and onto the phone, phoned the police in the town, finally got hold of someone, because it had been later in the evening. Just had to try and get hold of the local station, and the first reaction from the boss apparently was, well, he's both had a few too many, and he's probably just laying down by the rocks somewhere to kip it off for half an hour, so let's just wait and we'll see if he comes back in the morning. But Greg was beside himself, man, completely beside himself. So he banged on at them, running out of money as he was going, because it's a payphone. Finally somebody agreed that they would jump in the car and come out and have a wee look, going on about severed hands and barbecues and all sorts of things going on. So he waited for a while, and it was about half an hour, 40 minutes later, a car finally showed up. Not a police car, just whoever the local constable was that had taken the call had jumped in his own motor and driven out to, put his mind at ease. And by this point, Greg had been making such a ruckus about this that the camp warden, who had a wee house next to the shop, he'd come out to see what was going on, and could smell a wee bit of booze on his breath, apparently. So they had been having a wee snifter when they were out in the boat. Not a safe thing to do at any point, but back in the day, so they calmed it down. The two wives were up. Obviously, Joe's wife was getting a wee bit more beside herself, but Greg's wife knew that they'd both been out having a wee drink as well. Well, both the wives knew that, but Greg's wife, because she wasn't quite so emotionally attached to it all, was kind of thinking the same as the policeman, that they'd had a few, and he'd had a wee sit down somewhere and was probably snoozing, and if somebody's hunkered down behind a rock in that darkness, you're not going to see them. Nobody really understood what Greg was going on about in this grill, this barbecue, and the hand and the ring, and he was a wee bit beside himself. But the police arrived, and Greg got back in his car, and the policeman followed them down, and they drove down to the slipway again so they could walk through the wee bay. The warden arrived with his big Land Rover just after them, which would have been helpful to have done beforehand, because it can cover the ground a lot better. They got down there. The warden edged his Land Rover as far into the path to the wee bay as he could, and put on his full beams just to provide some light so that they could see what was going on. Greg was shouting for Joe again, hit his horn when he got there. Still no response from anything. So Greg, the policeman, the warden, they walked along the path to the wee bay from the slipway, and out onto the gravel. There was nothing there. There was just nothing there at all. It was completely empty. Nobody could see any signs of anything. Greg was saying how he'd kicked the thing over and got the hand out of it, and it was just, it looked like a place hadn't been touched since the tide had last been in and out. So, policeman rolled his eyes, the warden got a bit annoyed, and everyone just made the same kind of assumption that both had a little bit too much, and Joe was sleeping it off somewhere, and Greg had just kind of lost his senses a wee bit, as maybe you do. So Greg went back to the van with the wives, the warden went back to his house, policeman nipped off back into town, and that was kind of it. Next morning, kind of half expected Joe to have shown up if he was just off sleeping it somewhere, but Greg was sure about that hand. He was sure. was kind of like burnt into his eyeballs, you know, that kind of surety. So he took a wander back down to see if he could find his mate, see where Joe had got to, find him sleeping it off somewhere still. Well, it was getting a wee bit later in the morning, so unlikely he'd have slept through. It gets cold, you know. Still no sign of him. The bay still completely clear. Wasn't down behind any of the big rocks. Couldn't see him around the tree line. No sign of him whatsoever. He was just gone. Gone. Completely gone. And that's how it stayed. You know, missing person report went out after another couple of days and realised that he wasn't coming back. There was rumours that there'd maybe been a wee bit of a falling out when they were out in the boat and somebody had gone overboard and was either making up stories or had just, you know, had a bit of a breakdown and imagined it all to get rid of the memory of what he'd maybe done to his best mate. But nobody really believed that, because they really were, you know, proper best mates. Spent more time with each other than they did with their wives, that was for sure. So that was it. Bye. Joe's wife never went back to the caravan, but Greg and his wife, they kept coming back, and he'd always go and have a wander about just in case he could see where Joe might have gone to. But it was just one of these cases. Somebody's gone missing and they're not getting found. They're just gone. The only thing Greg had in his head was that he'd found that grill, he'd found that barbecue, and it had that hand on it, and it was wearing Joe's wedding ring. He was sure of that. He was sure. He swore for a whole year that that was the case. So about a year later, they were back out again. They did, just him and his wife, Greg and his wife. He didn't go out fishing anymore. He would just go and wander up and down at the bay and see if he could see wherever his mate might have gone. You know, he missed him. That's what happens when you lose a close friend. You miss them. But nothing. And until one morning, and Greg's wife heard him getting up early, you know, crashing about in the wee van, going out into the awning, and then kind of a bit of a commotion, like he'd knocked over the wee folding camping table or something. It was just like a bit of a kind of a wee crash and a bang. She's like, oh God, what's he up to now? Probably try to kill himself boiling the kettle on the wee gas stove. So she got up, got herself covered up because it's cold. So it took her a few minutes to get up and get organised and orientated, and she's shouting on him, what the bloody hell are you doing? There was no response from him. And she faffed her way through, out into the awning, and he's not there. The awning's all closed up. There's no sign that he's gone anywhere. So maybe he's nicked up to the toilet block, which is, you know, a couple of minutes away. So if you need to go, you need to get your boots on. So maybe that was what all the noise was, him just getting sorted and then letting himself out the awning and zipping it back up. So she just huffed and puffed, and she put some water in the kettle, put it in the wee gas stove, lit that up to get a wee cup of tea brewing for him coming back. And after a few minutes he still wasn't back, and after a few more minutes he still wasn't back. So, to heck with this. So she took the kettle off. It had been simmering away. It whistled a good few minutes before. But she took it off the gas stove, unzipped the awning, stepped out, and then nearly fell, tripping over what she described as a kind of old kettle drum grill barbecue, just a couple of feet outside the awning door, burning away, the bits of wood and the coals in it glowing red, and sitting on the grill, a hand. Now, she didn't grab a stick and flick that hand off the grill. She didn't do anything like that, because straight away she knew her husband's hand. She recognised it instantly. Hadn't been on there long, but it was on there, and it was beginning to cook. But she could see his wedding ring, just like Greg had described seeing Joe's, on the hand as it was curling, as the tendons were, you know, heating. And Nasty thought. She screamed. She says she must have fainted. Nobody knows. She was found about half an hour later, lying inside the awning with the door still open. No sign of her husband. She came to. She started freaking out about the grill, about the hand, about all sorts of nonsense. Everyone thought she'd just lost it completely. No sign of the husband, and certainly no grill in hand, sitting just outside the awning attached to the caravan. Everyone just assumed there'd been some sort of a fight and he'd taken off. He'd left the car if he'd taken off. She didn't drive, but there was no sign of him. Again, the police searched. They came out. The assumption was that he'd just nicked off. He'd had enough and he'd gone. Maybe the guilt of whatever he did to his mate out in the bay, the year before, had finally got to him, and he'd taken off and just abandoned her, and she'd come up with this fantastical story based on what he'd said the year before, but no sign of him whatsoever. And that was kind of the story. Only once I'd finished chatting to Tom, there for about 40 minutes, I was walking back down, and I took a walk back down by that old van in Onan, the one that we'd been talking about, and walked past, and there was somebody there, which quite surprised me. A wee old woman, proper, as old as old Tom, so 80s, 90s, maybe older, maybe younger, and she just weathered, I don't know, but she was just sat there outside the awning in an old, canvas folding chair, big jacket on, all wrapped up, looking like she was keeping warm, just staring at the gap in the wall that was next to the van and led down to the path that went down to the beach and the bay. She was just staring, just sat there, staring, waiting for someone to come back.